Welcome back, truth seekers and guardians of the heart. You've tuned into Secrets Behind the Stars, the one corner of the internet where we refuse to blink when the glitter fades and the silence grows heavy. Tonight isn't about a premiere or a trophy, it's about the tremor that rattles the brightest lives when the cameras stop clicking. We're retracing a night that rocked one of Turkey's most adored couples. A night when Barış Baktas, a man whose smile seems to light every room, slipped into the shadows and simply did not return. And a night when Yağmur held her breath until sunrise, waiting for a key that didn't turn, for footsteps that didn't come. If you're ready to witness the weight of fame and the stubborn strength of love, you're in exactly the right place. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed to Secrets Behind the Stars. If long-form, compassionate storytelling is your thing, the join button opens the door to our inner circle. Your likes illuminate the darkness, and your comments keep the conversation alive. Now, let's rewind the clock to the evening that flipped everything upside down. It began with the camouflage of normalcy, the kind that lulls you into believing the night will stay gentle. In the sanctuary of their shared space, away from humming sets and relentless schedules, Yağmur and Barış Baktas were simply a couple living a quiet moment. They cooked. They teased each other about unwashed dishes. They sank into a couch that knew their shape like a familiar melody. It was warm, routine, safe. Then a vibration cut through the calm. One message, then another, then a third. To anyone else, nothing would have seemed off. But Yağmur, who reads Barış like a private script, noticed what others would miss: the flicker behind the eyes, the breath that caught and didn't fully land, the way his shoulders held a weight he didn't announce. The smile came anyway, practiced and protective. He tried to paper over the tremor. "I just need some air," he said, reaching for his jacket. A sentence so ordinary it carries no warning. She nodded, trusting the rhythm of their days, trusting him. Some air usually takes 20 minutes. Maybe a loop around the block. Maybe a short drive to let the thoughts settle wherever the city is quietest at night. But as the hands of the clock slid past midnight, and then past the next marker, the stillness in the house grew louder than any siren. The first call went unanswered. The second rolled to voicemail. Messages sat unsent, little gray bubbles that never turned blue. Location sharing. So mundane in normal circumstances, so comforting in relationships, was suddenly off. That was the detail that chilled her. For a man whose public movements are often mapped online by fans with detective-level devotion, a total blackout didn't make sense. Confusion turned into worry, then to a panic that rattled the bones. She reached out to his closest people, her voice small and shaking at the edges. He wouldn't disappear. Something's wrong. And they agreed, because every friend who really knows him will tell you the same thing: absence isn't his style. He checks in. He owns his responsibilities. He doesn't vanish. Before long, the quiet rupture inside their home spilled out into the digital streets. People noticed the gap where his presence should be. Comments multiplied with tense urgency: "Where is Barış? Is he okay? Did something happen?" The speculation spun in wide, messy circles. Reporters traced his routine. The training facility he favors, the cafe where they know his order without asking, the lookout point he's posted at before when the city looked better from above. Nothing. No car. No sighting. No breadcrumb trail. Back at the house, the scene narrowed to a single figure tracing small patterns in a room that suddenly felt too large. Yağmur cried, quietly at first, then in waves that came without asking permission. She stood by the window, then sat, then stood again, caught in the cruel loop of not knowing. She called her family for comfort, tried to breathe in counts of 4, then 8, then 10, but the mind is a runaway train when fear is driving. It surfaces every worst scenario. An accident. A confrontation. A headline she isn't ready to read. The night tasted metallic, the minutes syrup slow. The home that had cradled their laughter felt like it was holding its breath with her. Then the sky started to pale. It wasn't a triumphant return or a cinematic rush. Around 5 a.m., he came back the way a tide returns, quiet, inevitable, a little battered by whatever he'd been fighting. He moved with caution like the hallway might break under his steps. Tired. Haunted. Eyes rimmed with the cost of the night. He wasn't coming back from a celebration. He was coming back from a war only he could see. The door clicked, and the sound split the spell of dread. The silence burst, and the living room inhaled again. When she saw him, the dam inside her broke. Relief was a physical thing, knees weak, lungs greedy for air. It wrestled immediately with anger, sick of being left alone in the dark. She had 1,000 questions and one overriding need to feel his heartbeat under her palm. He murmured her name and asked for a second. That second felt both too much and not enough. The air in the house tightened. This wasn't a screaming match. It was a reckoning between two people who love each other on days when love is heavy, too. In the softer light of morning, with the city just beginning to stir, he spoke about the pressure he'd been swallowing without naming it. Not a secret affair. Not a dwindling affection. Something more ordinary and more brutal, a sense of being pinned by expectations, by dates circled on calendars, by a career humming at a pitch his body couldn't sustain. He described the last weeks as a room that kept shrinking, a voice in his head that kept saying there isn't enough of you to go around. He had thought a walk could quiet the noise. He admitted he didn't understand how fast that need for escape would snowball into a shutdown. I've never felt so boxed in, he said, voice cracking around the truth. I needed space to think and made a mess of our night instead. I didn't mean to scare you. I just couldn't hear myself anymore. It was not an excuse. It was the cost of surviving under bright lights without a pause button. She told him what the hours had done to her. How the not knowing carved hollows inside her chest. How partnership means choosing not to go silent when it's hardest to speak. It wasn't only that he'd gone, it was that she'd been left without a line to hold. Trust, once bruised, takes time to heal. But honesty is a salve. His vulnerability stripped away her defensiveness piece by piece. The two of them sat side by side for a long time, letting the morning grow bold around them. They talked, then didn't. They held hands, then hugged, then drifted into a dense quiet that felt, finally, like rest. When words came back, they were gentler. They apologized. They promised better safeguards. The coffee went cold on the table, untouched, and still the conversation continued. Whispers in their circles say that day did more for them than any glossy photo shoot ever could. It pushed them into a kind of transparency they'd never quite reached before. They stripped off the public armor, the poised answers, the curated calm, and met as two people trying to protect their tenderness in a world that can be unkind to it. They saw that love isn't a highlight reel. It's a practice. It's showing up on the days when all the shows are canceled and you're just two hearts negotiating fear. And now I want to pause and turn to you, the secrets behind the stars family. Have you ever felt that pull to disappear for a while? Not because you don't care, but because the sound of your life got too loud to think straight? We glamorize celebrity, but nights like this are the reminder that a big name doesn't insulate a person from the ache of being human. Does hearing what happened make you see Barış differently? Does it deepen your respect for the courage it takes to say, "I'm not okay," out loud? Let's meet in the comments with care, and talk about the weight of expectations and how we can hold space for the people we love when they wobble. Those closest to the couple say this wasn't a blip, it was a turning point. Friends describe looking into his face in the days after and seeing a man who had finally hit capacity. He wasn't dismissive. He wasn't dodging. He was done pretending he could outrun the fatigue and the fear. The rumor quietly circling is that he has agreed to bring in professional help, not as a last resort but as a wise investment in the rest of his life. Therapy. Better boundaries. A calendar that breathes. It isn't glamorous, but it's brave. And what about her? In those first fragile hours, they say she chose compassion instead of judgment. She didn't minimize the hurt. She didn't let the night slide by. But she also didn't mistake his collapse for a lack of love. She steadied him, and together they started picking up the pieces. In the calm after the storm, the two of them reportedly made a pact to put their relationship on the front burner. There had been talk of a tiny vacation for months, something sweet and short by the sea, forever pushed back by last-minute scripts and obligations. That plan is no longer a luxury on the shelf. It's happening, sooner rather than later. They need new air in their lungs. They need the kind of silence that isn't ominous but soothing, the hush of waves, the softness of mornings without alarms, the laughter that returns when the body finally unclenches. They want time where the only angles are of sun and shade, not cameras. Of course the night didn't fade quietly. Social feeds had already tilted into panic, and the press did what the press does, guessed, tested theories, tried to build a narrative from an absence. Minutes felt like years out there. But inside their own little universe, two people decided to choose each other again. They learned, the hard way, that communication isn't a luxury in love, it's oxygen. The scariest part of the night gave way to daylight because, in the end, they refused to treat each other like adversaries. They opted for understanding over accusation, grace over pride. A moment that could have cracked them wide open became the hinge on which they turned toward a healthier way of being. We'll keep sending our best to the couple as they move through this healing with care. And if this look behind the curtain resonated with you, tap that like button. It helps us share the stories that aren't always shiny but are always true. Make sure you're subscribed to Secrets Behind the Stars, and ring that bell so you never miss an episode. If you want to support thoughtful storytelling and get closer to the heart of what we do, the join button is waiting for you. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes we have to get a little lost to find out who will go out into the night and search for us. Until next time, take a breath, take care, and keep your heart open for the people who need you most. Later that day, away from headlines and opinions, they started making small, practical shifts. The talks weren't performative. They set rules for themselves about late-night vanishing acts and emergency calls, about telling the truth before it spills over. He drew boundaries around his commitments with a steadier hand. She asked for, and received, clearer signals when the pressure climbs. They joked through the awkwardness of new habits. They planned dinners that didn't get cancelled. They held on to each other when sleep got shallow and worries returned. Healing isn't glamorous, and it isn't linear, but two people doing the work is worth more than 1,000 rumors. And for anyone still asking, yes, the night marked him. Friends describe a softness around his edges that hadn't been there before, not weakness, but a tenderness that arrives when you stop wrestling your own humanity. He started saying no to things he would once have accepted out of obligation. He started choosing rest without apology. He let himself be more than a public persona. He let himself be a man allowed to be tired, who can ask for help and still be strong. And if you look closely, you can see how that change reflects in her, too. There's a steadier glow in the way she stands next to him now, a quiet certainty that comes from surviving a scare and remembering what matters. So yes, the night was messy. It made strangers worry and stirred up theories. It made a house echo and turned a phone into a void. But it also opened a different door, the kind you walk through hand in hand, promising not perfection, but attention, not control, but care. For Barış Baktas and Yağmur Yüksel, it was the night they stopped performing strength and started practicing it, the night they recognized that being loved doesn't mean you can't break, and breaking doesn't mean you're alone. If there's a lesson we can all carry, it's this: speak before the silence grows teeth, listen before the pain raises its voice, and choose the person in front of you even when you're afraid. That's not a headline. That's a lifeline. We'll be here to follow their journey with empathy and curiosity, just as we are for every story that teaches us something about what it means to be human under the glare. Keep your notifications on, stay kind in the comments, and remember why we gather at Secrets Behind the Stars: not to judge, but to understand, not to pry, but to witness. Sometimes the bravest chapter in a love story is the one no one expected, the one where two people come back to the door at 5 a.m. Look each other in the eyes, and choose to begin again.